Hey guys, today we are discussing the reality of being an expat in the UK. Because let me tell you, it is not all good. I think if you see expats online and they talk about how perfect the UK is, they are lying. And I don't mean any disrespect to British people, but there's no such thing as a perfect country. Now, how I look at it is, do the pros of the UK outweigh the cons for you? Because it's going to be different for everyone. Because my pros to living in the UK may not be pros for you. It is so subjective. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Alana and I'm a Canadian, but I have been living here in the UK for nearly 8 years. And today I wanted to share you some pros and cons to living in the UK so you can decide whether it is worth it for you. Now, to start us off strong, we have a real sense of identity in the UK. I love that British culture is a very real, well-defined thing. You have British slang, you have British food, you have British phrases, you have British quirks. There's just like a real sense of identity. Not to say that Canadian culture doesn't exist, but I find where Canada and America can be so similar, there's so much overlap between our two countries, it feels a bit less unique. Whereas here in the UK, there is such a sense of identity, of historic competitions that still happen today, of slang that's hundreds of years old, British food and snacks and dishes that are historic, that are still eaten today. There's just this real sense of identity and I really truly love it. Next up, a huge pro for me personally is public transportation. As a Canadian, I could not get around back home with public transport. You basically have to have a car. Here in the UK, a car is certainly helpful, but it's not always necessary. So I sold my old car, my piece of crap car, back in 2020, and I've been relying on public transport ever since. It's not perfect, sure, but it is possible for me to get around using the buses, using the trains. If you live in London, you will never need a car because the public transport is just like perfect. Perfect is not the right word. It's nearly perfect. If you live in the middle of nowhere in a small countryside, sounds lovely, by the way, but public transport is probably less desirable for you. I find on average, for a lot of towns, villages, certainly cities here in the UK, you can get by using public transport. Just going to the grocery store, just going to the library, the gym, going into a nearby city. Like, the public transport here is truly wonderful and I rely on it a lot. You just gotta hope that there's no strikes. Number 3 on my personal pros list to living in the UK, we have to talk about the NHS, or the National Health Service. Now, depending which country you are originally from, the NHS may be very similar to your home country or very different. As a Canadian, it's very similar, and I am grateful for that fact. The NHS here in the UK is free at the point of contact. So you go to the emergency room because something happened. You go to the doctor because you have an issue. You don't have to pay for the privilege of having that appointment. Now, free, I use loosely because, especially as an expat, it is not necessarily free. By that, I mean you are going to be paying taxes like anybody else. You're working in the UK, you're going to pay taxes. Those taxes go towards the NHS, but as part of your visa, you have to pay the NHS surcharge. And this is a huge lump sum that you have to pay, whether you intend on using the NHS or not, which does suck, but it's just the joys of being an expat. I will say though, from my experiences using the NHS over the last nearly 8 years, they have all been positive. The drawback to a system like the UK is that waiting times can be bad sometimes. If you're getting an appointment with a doctor, sometimes it can be a long wait, but you don't have to worry about the cost of going to the emergency room or going to the doctors. So you kind of have to weigh out the pros and cons. Number 4, better work-life balance. As a Canadian, I find the UK has a much better work-life balance than what I'm used to back home. A large part of this is holiday time. So in Canada, typically you are given 2 weeks paid vacation, which is really actually 10 days, right? You think of like a working week. So you get 10 days paid vacation. Lovely. In the UK, almost all workers are legally entitled to 5.6 paid weeks holiday a year. So for me, this is a huge pro. If I went back to Canada, this is something that I would really struggle with readapting to the Canadian way. Number 5, one of my personal favorites about living in the UK is the charm and the character. You go to the supermarket and maybe it's in like a really old historic building. You go to a pub and it's like 400 years old. There's homes that like a little bit wonky, but they all have like their charm and their character. There's a real history to buildings and architecture just around your everyday life. You've got gorgeous cathedrals, abbeys, churches, and these are not they're historic sites, but they're actually used today. So for instance, I live in Kent. I love visiting the cathedral in Canterbury. It's absolutely beautiful. That is a working cathedral. That is a cathedral that holds services just like any other church. I just think it's incredible. These things aren't just for show. They're used by everyday people. And I think that is so much fun. Number 6, we have to talk about British pubs. On the face of it, you think, okay, you go to a pub to drink. But there's so much more than that. One of the things I love is going to a new pub or a favorite of mine over the years, something that is historic, it's cozy. Maybe there's like wood beams and there's leather chairs and maybe there's a dog sleeping by a fire. They are just cozy and historic and I just love it. There's a real comfortable atmosphere. And of course, not all pubs are like this. Some pubs perhaps maybe a bit louder, a bit rougher, but for me, finding, that real historic, old, cozy pub is just, I love it. I've been very privileged to do a lot of traveling, but I always feel at home in a British pub. Next up, a huge pro for me, especially being a Canadian, is the location. Love to travel. The UK is a great home base. When I was living in Canada, the idea of booking a trip, say, to Spain or to Italy or to Greece, the flight alone was almost unattainable. Add in the fact that I could only get 2 weeks vacation every year and trips like that were looking less and less likely. For me personally, living here in Kent, I can get to Heathrow Airport pretty easily. I can get to Gatwick Airport pretty easily. And through those airports, I can get to like mainland Europe shockingly fast. Earlier in the year, I went to Florence and I was so surprised at how short that flight was. So if you are looking to travel, perhaps you're looking to move to the UK, even short term, maybe you only have a 2-year visa, the UK is a great home base if you are looking to travel. On mainland Europe particularly, the flights can be so cheap because they're so short. Now with all those lovely pros to being an expat in the UK, of course, we have to talk about the cons. And to start off, why not with the cost of living? Now, in certain parts of the country, this is actually somewhat of a positive, but for a lot of parts of the UK, the cost of living is difficult. You watch the news and you will hear the cost of living crisis often. While so many expats really gravitate towards London, which I totally get, personally not for me. And just as a side note, the UK is so much more than London. So if you are not interested in London, don't feel like, oh, there's nothing else for me or you have to live in London because everybody else does. It's really not that way. The small towns and the villages really for me are so much better than London, but that's besides the point. The cost of living in London is wild. It is hugely expensive. Obviously, again, pros and cons. If you love it there, you will have to just swallow the fact that it is extremely expensive to live there. But unfortunately, as more and more people are leaving London, the surrounding areas are getting more and more expensive. So it's really hitting a lot of places around the UK. Things are just expensive. But that's not to say your home country isn't suffering the same fate. I know for Canada, where I'm from in Southern Ontario, they are also having a cost of living crisis. The cost of homes are just unbelievable. So for me, it's kind of like either country, I'm going to be spending a lot, but it might be different for you. Number 2, we have to talk about the weather now. I love the sun. And I miss the sun. Living in the UK means you are going to have to sacrifice some sun. As a Canadian, I didn't realize how sunny Southern Ontario was until I moved to England. Wow, that was a shocker. The stereotype is that the UK is basically dark and rainy 90% of the time, which is not true. But there is a grain of truth in there. For me personally, I find the winter time is very difficult. It is dark, rainy, gloomy, which is very atmospheric if you're like home on the couch all snugged up. But if you are like going to work and it's just dark and you get home and it's just dark and it's just like raining every weekend, so you can't go out and do anything. And then it's just like overcast and you can't remember the last time you saw the sun. Although as a Canadian, I really appreciate that the UK gets very little snow. So again, pros and cons. Number 3, I would like to talk about horrific traffic. Some of the worst traffic I have ever seen has been in England, and I think there are a couple of factors that contribute to this problem. England is a small country with a lot of people, with a lot of cars, and very small roads. As much as I love the charm and the history of the UK, right? You get those beautiful buildings and there's like, things are a bit quirky and there's a lot of charm everywhere. A lot of historic roads, which is very cool. But then when you need to drive on the historic road at rush hour, it sucks. Thankfully, in the last few years where I haven't been driving and I've been relying on the public transport, particularly the trains, of course, cutting out traffic is something that is very helpful, unless the train is delayed, in which case that also sucks. There have been times when it's supposed to take me 45 minutes to drive home, back when I was driving, and it would end up taking 3 hours. So, the joys of small historic roads built in a time when we didn't have so many cars. Number 4, and probably in my humble opinion, the worst one, is missing friends and family. If you are moving to the UK, you are going to leave behind everyone you have ever known, loved, or cared about. And that is something that just cannot be overlooked. And while living in the UK can be fun and exciting, it's a new adventure, you get to travel and try all sorts of new things, don't forget that homesickness is very real and it can be very difficult to handle. And what I have found with nearly 8 years of living here is that I can recreate a lot of the things from my Canadian life here in the UK. I can recreate things here, or I can find really close replacements here, but friends and family are one of those things that you can't replicate. So if you rely heavily on your family, you need to be around them all the time. Like, that is something that is very integral to your day-to-day life. When you move to a foreign country, that is going to be extremely jarring, and I think some people don't realize how difficult that actually is. Number 5, we have to talk about difficult accents. So this really threw me for the first couple of years, and sometimes even now. I find Canadians don't have a lot of variety when it comes to the way we speak. Of course, if you go to one coast to the other, perhaps, but day-to-day life, a lot of Canadians sound the same. And I do love here that there's a real variety of accents. There's a variety of slang or word choices depending on where you live. But as a foreigner, it can be really difficult to get a hang of, particularly at work. So if you are already stressed out, you're anxious at work, you are trying to find your footing, and then you have to deal with someone who you literally cannot understand, it can just be a lot. If you give it time, patience, practice, it will get better. I have found now, nearly 8 years, I don't necessarily hear accents anymore, which is weird. just on its own. But if I travel even, 30 miles away, 40 miles away to the other side of the UK, I am shocked at how different the accents sound. But you do start to get used to the ones around you, the ones that you hear the most, the ones you hear at work or your friends hear. Eventually you won't hear them anymore, which is kind of wild. But definitely at the beginning of my time as an expat, someone would come into work, or the worst one was on the phone. Say I had to call the council for something to do with my apartment and I couldn't understand the person on the phone. It's difficult. You just have to take a breath, relax, just explain to them, I'm so sorry, I don't understand. Number 6, and I think a very real con that not a lot of people talk about, is feeling lost. Moving abroad is not what you see on Instagram or on movies. It has genuinely been the hardest thing that I have ever done. That doesn't mean there are no positive moments. There obviously are, because I'm still here and I still want to be here, but I think we often glaze over the bad stuff. And one of them, a big one for me, is the sense of feeling lost. Maybe you feel like you're the odd one out at work, or you don't have any friends, or you are alone on holidays here in the UK. That is a very real thing that people experience, but we often don't share. And I do find that over the years, my own identity has kind of changed and adapted and altered, and that can feel very strange. And there is an element of feeling lost. Like, I'm not British, but I'm also not really Canadian anymore either. It's just that there's a lot of feelings. And I think this scenario really upsets people, and it can be a lot. And it is a lot, and it is upsetting. It's just whether you are willing to work through it or not. Because being abroad, living in a foreign country, being a foreigner or an expat in a different place, it is a lot, and it does change who you are, and it does change your perspective on the world and on yourself. So there's a lot of things to work through. And number 7 of a con that I have faced here in the UK is you do have to sacrifice certain comforts. From my experience, the homes here in the UK are much smaller than what you would typically see in North America. So back home in Canada, maybe you have a backyard, a driveway, a basement, a laundry room, closets. I don't have that here. I don't have a backyard currently. They do exist, I just don't have one. Driveways are much less common. Basements, like fully fitted out, decorated basements, I don't know anybody who has one. This particular flat doesn't have a single closet, so you have to get creative with your organization. We also don't have aircon here. Many of the homes, I'd say like 90% of homes in the UK don't have aircon. British people will tell you that you don't need it, but I found in the last few years, the summers are very hot. So living in the UK, while it is fabulous, while there's lots of history and culture and charm, you do have to sacrifice certain comforts that you might have access to back home. And it all comes down to you as a person, whether you are willing to give those things up or not. Not to be like a brat or to be spoiled, but if you grow up in North America, for instance, and every home you've ever had has a driveway or has a backyard or has a laundry room, and you just kind of take it as the standard. That doesn't mean it's going to be the standard here. There are certain things like that that really bothered me at first because I was just so used to them. It was just a convenience that I've always had that I no longer had here in the UK. With time, I have made my peace with the fact that I don't have those things, and I'm okay with it, but it is something that you have to think about. No country is perfect. It's really just whether the pros outweigh the cons for you. If you have any questions, please leave them down below. Definitely check out this video on why expats leave the UK. But until then, I'll see you in the next one.